Welcome to Bottom Up, a monthly podcast dedicated to issues and topics of interest to young lawyers in Wisconsin and beyond. I'm Emil Obiagele.
And I'm Kristen Hardy, and we're your hosts. This is the Bottom Up Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Bottom Up Podcast, episode 8 this month. It's April 2023. This is Joe Forward coming to you from the State Bar Center in Madison. Emil Obiagele and Kristen Hardy are not here today. They're normally your co-hosts, but I decided to step in, give them a little break this month, and I'm here with some special guests. They are with the Advocacy and Access to Justice team here at the State Bar, and we're going to learn a little bit about what they do for the State Bar and some of the issues that they work on. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. First, we have Cale Battles. He's the Senior Government Relations Coordinator. Cale, how you doing?
Good, Joe. Thanks for the invite for episode 8.
Sure. Next, we have Lynne Davis. She is also a Government Relations Coordinator. Lynne, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having us.
And we also have Devin Martin. Devin is the Grassroots Outreach Coordinator at the State Bar. Devin, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Joe.
So, thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share a little information about what your group does. But first, I wanted to have you guys sort of introduce yourselves a little bit. Tell us how you got into this role, and then we'll kind of move into what you do on a day-to-day basis. So, Cale, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I've been working as a government relations coordinator at the State Bar for about 16 years, and before that, I worked in the Wisconsin State Legislature for a couple of different legislators. Did some committee work for them, did policy work, and did your common everyday scheduling and constituent work with them. So kind of ran the gamut with that. Before that, jokingly, we were talking before, I worked in radio for about a year, and then I discovered when I got my first paycheck, I didn't want to do radio very much after that. That was one of those shockers when you call your parents and you're like, "Hey, I went to college for this. Thanks for everything. Oh, and I need more money now because I actually make less now than I did in college." So I did that. I think just generally I've been, even when I was a younger kid, even working through college, and then I had kind of lucked into a few things with legislators coming onto the radio program, and I just got really interested a little bit more into the political aspect of the state. I got interested really in kind of policy stuff, and it's just something I've always kind of enjoyed. I enjoyed it probably about a decade ago than I do now. It's this kind of time, and times have changed a little bit more in Wisconsin politics, but still, I enjoy the aspect of it. I enjoy the uniqueness of the State Bar and how each day and each issues kind of brings something different. The diversity of thought in the bar, the diversity of issues are always interesting. So it's been an enjoyable time. I like doing it quite a bit.
Yeah. So what about you, Lynne? What brought you into this work?
Well, I've been here at the State Bar in Wisconsin for almost 8 years, and prior to that, I was with the Illinois State Bar for 7 years. So I've got almost 15 years in Bar Association lobbying experience. Prior to that, I was with the Illinois Senate for 5 years. So when I was there, I did policy analysis and a little bit of communications, but primarily focusing on policy issues and research on those specific issues, focusing a lot on licensed activities, agriculture and conservation, environment and energy, and then some executive issues like guns. And I really like working for the Bar Association. Kind of like Cale, the policy issues are so diverse, but it's also nice to see that not only are we helping our members, but a lot of the work that we do, particularly in the sections, helps their clients. And I've found that most people do not go to an attorney on a good day. Even if it's a good situation like adopting a child, it's still very stressful. So it's really rewarding to know that anything that we do that helps them make something that's difficult or burdensome a bit easier is just pretty rewarding and nice to know that you're helping improve that.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Devin?
So my job here is to connect our members with their lawmakers. But before I came to the bar, I did grassroots. Since I got out of college, I have been I started in environmental campaigning and eventually made my way over to Sierra Club, where we ran a couple of campaigns. One in particular was a coal campaign down in Louisiana. And then I did some similar work here in Wisconsin when I moved up before I came over to the state bar.
That's great. I want to step back a little bit and have you guys explain the bar structure and how your functions work through the state bar, because I think a lot of people, especially younger attorneys, newer attorneys who aren't really familiar with the state bar's work or what we do on a daily basis, they could benefit from understanding your roles and how they fit into the bigger organization. So can you explain, Cale, the function of the lobbying group? Because that's really what you're doing, is lobbying on behalf of the state bar. But how does your lobbying authority come to you? Can you explain that process?
Yeah, so the ability for the bar to lobby is laid out in Supreme Court rules, as the bar is the creation of the court, so that there's specific rules and procedures and policies that we follow that's based upon both the Supreme Court rules and then the state bar bylaws and on how that's set up. We don't set policy. Our members set policy through elected, in this particular case, our Board of Governors for larger state bar issues, and then sections that have voluntarily chose to participate in the lobby program also have some of that same. There's a little bit, and we'll probably get into some of the rules and differences there that they have to follow, but really it's set up through the court. The Board of Governors can take positions based upon how it impacts administration of justice, the delivery of legal services. There's very strong thresholds for how a position can be taken, how it's forwarded through the board. The language of that position becomes very important. And so we have, obviously the board makes those decisions. We have a policy book that's on our website that the board has created, and the positions run really the gamut of the practice, and I think they really look at it in terms of our board members look at as how is this, if we take a position, how is this going to affect the practice of law in the positive? And so, for instance, we have positions on funding of district attorneys, funding of public defenders. We have position on taxation of legal services as a professional service. And those all have to go through the board. Once a position is taken, the board then has to actively take a position to remove it. So those last through different presidential terms, different board terms. And so we really kind of use that, I would say, kind of as our guiding way through the legislative process. So when the legislature comes up with something, we have the text of the position that we have, but then we have other committees that assist us in guidance, whether it be our BOG policy committee. So if you're on the Board of Governors, the policy committee offers some guidance to us. And then we also have our Legislative Oversight Committee, which does a lot of the section overview, but also assists us in reviewing positions as well. But any positions that is approved has to be a 60% majority of the Board of Governors, so it's a fairly high threshold. I think the benefit of having the Board of Governors is it's always a diverse geographic-based body. The practice members come from all areas of the state. We have non-resident members, obviously. We have government lawyers division, senior lawyers, young lawyers. And so I think that they all have different perspectives that they bring to, and so when they get to that position, it's one that's vetted and thought of throughout the process. I think the last couple of years we've done a really good job. I mean, it used to be when I first came in to the bar, we had our policy position was 80 some odd pages long, I think, and we've done a good job kind of culling through that a little bit and making the positions much more kind of very issue specific and issue based, which has helped. We've been able to combine some positions that make a lot of sense, and so that really kind of is where it starts. The other thing that the Board of Governors does every so often, they kind of set us up in terms of, we kind of use our expertise. We kind of see how the political makeup of the legislature is. We kind of see who's in the executive branch, and we can kind of give them at least a little bit of our advice in terms of some of these things that you're looking at doing might be, I wouldn't call them priority positions, but kind of things we want to focus on during the legislative session. So the last couple of years have kind of been unchanged. I mean, it's the funding of the system, the expungement reform. I think we have returning 17-year-olds to the juvenile court jurisdiction, funding of civil legal needs. And so those are kind of, we focus, every position is weighted equally. It's not like you give one a 10 and one a 1. Everything's weighted equally, so whenever anything comes up, that's why we can have the ability to react or proactively reach out to legislators to be like, here's our position, here's what it says, and then we can kind of go forward through those discussions with policymakers to kind of assist them in the education process of what we're doing. And I think that's one of the things that we kind of look at it as. I mean, we kind of consider ourselves educators in a lot of ways. That's what we do every day. We go into legislators' offices, legislative staff, our members, and we're educating them on here's the legislative process, here's our issue, here's why this is important to us, and then that kind of sets our advocacy roadmap, so to speak, to where Lynne and I can work together. We work with our leadership, we work with the Board of Governors, we work with our sections, and then Devin kind of rounds out that message and assisting in people kind of communicating with their lawmakers on their priorities and their important aspects of it.
Yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Hi, Russell Nicolay here with Nicolay Law, Accident and Injury Lawyers. If you have clients that have been injured, my office would love the opportunity to help them get compensated and get their life back on track. We handle referrals and co-counsel relationships on injury cases all across Wisconsin.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
That's great. And so just to clarify that the Board of Governors is 52 members of the bar who are elected in 16 different districts. Some districts like Dane and Milwaukee have multiple board members. Other counties may have just one board member, but it's made up of 16 districts throughout the state. That's right?
Yep.
Okay. And then Lynne, I want to get into the grassroots stuff and talk more about that. But Lynne, you mentioned, so we know how the policy positions then come to you from the board, but how do you can you explain how you work with specific sections on positions that they may want to take or oppose?
Sure, there's two ways essentially. It's reactive. They react and respond to legislation that's introduced, or they are proactive in initiating the legislation from them. So when the section, Cale and I will keep an eye on legislation that's introduced, and then we will highlight that for the sections that we think are most relevant. And when we do that, they'll review, usually each section has a legislative committee, and they'll review it, and they'll kind of weed out the things that they think are the most important and least important, and then take that to the full board, usually at a section meeting unless there's a pressing time issue. And the board will discuss it, determine what position they want to take. And again, like the Board of Governors, section boards have to take a vote in favor of the motion, and it has to pass with a 60% majority of the voting members. So once they do that, we do an internal circulation just to ensure there's no conflict with any other sections. And then Cale and I take the lead on that at the Capitol, and we will either actively engage in the legislative process, working with our members to testify at hearings, submitting written testimony, having meetings with legislators about the legislation, or we'll take a more passive approach if it's something that's important but the members don't have as much ability or interest in being as active and engaged. So then we'll just kind of let them know where our position is, but not be quite as active in the engagement. And then when it comes to initiatives, members will often recognize a flaw in the law or a gap in the law that needs to be remedied. So they will take time, and it usually takes quite a bit of time, even for a very small change, for them to develop the legislation internally. And then when they finally get a draft done that they're satisfied with, they will pass it again with a 60% majority of voting members in favor of the motion. And then Cale and I will often take it to other interest groups that we know will be impacted by this legislation. Then once we vet it through all of them and incorporate changes or talk to them about, issues that they have with it and kind of meet in the middle, then we'll take it to the legislators, because you really are basically asking legislators for a favor when you're asking them to introduce legislation on your behalf. And so you want to make it as easy of a job for them to do as possible. Streamline things as much as possible before it even gets to them.
Okay. And remind me again, so we have, how many sections do we have? 26?
I'm not sure how many sections we have, but I know we have 13 lobbying sections.
So not all of them are lobbying sections.
Correct.
Are there sections that are more active than others?
Yes.
So what are the more active sections in the bar?
Well, Cale and I kind of divide them up, and the sections that are most active for me in terms of initiatives and taking positions are family law. They have been extremely proactive in initiatives. Children in the law has been to a degree, not with the volume that family law has, but they have had significant bills that they have passed in the last couple of years. That one of them was around for about 15 years before it finally got passed. So, and it was over almost 100 pages, whereas some of the family law initiatives that passed last session were 2-3 pages. So it just depends in quantity and volume how many, but definitely family law and child law.
Okay, great. And so, and Devin, in your role in connecting members with legislators, tell us about the advocacy network and the grassroots work that you're doing.
Sure. So one of the first things that we did when we started the advocacy or maybe revived the grassroots advocacy program here at the State Bar is ensure that people had a really simple, really easy way to reach out to their lawmakers. And today that often means sending an email. So if you go to wisbar.org/govrelations, you can find our action center. It is a web plugin that allows you to simply type in your address and will match you up with your state lawmakers and allow you to send a message to them on whether it's a topic that the State Bar is actively working on. We'll usually have an action alert up, and it has a pre-written message to give you talking points that you can edit and customize. There's also an option to send to custom write a message of your own choosing on anything that you'd like, and that's literally anything. So these messages aren't sent on behalf of the State Bar or with any kind of tag or notification that would say this is being sent with the State Bar on behalf of the State Bar. This is a message from you to your lawmaker. What we provide is a tool to make it really, really simple and easy. Some folks don't know who their state lawmaker is, or after an election, you may have had a long-standing state lawmaker that you knew or maybe even had a personal relationship with, but you don't know the freshman that just got elected. So if you don't know that information or you don't know that the email address to send them a message, none of that's an issue with this Action Center. It makes it very, very, very simple. And there's also options to make a phone call or sometimes even send a tweet or make a Facebook post and engage people on social media, which is also a really effective way to get people's attention really rapidly.
Yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
When it comes to lawyers' professional liability insurance, no company is more trustworthy than Wilmick when you're facing a malpractice claim. With their Wisconsin-licensed claims attorneys and strong network of defense counsel, find peace of mind with Wilmick, supporting and partnering with Wisconsin law firms since 1986.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up Podcast.
Piggyback on that real quick, Joe. So one of the things that Lynne and I see a lot is the composition of the legislature. So there's 132 legislators. 10 have a background as attorneys. Either they went to law school. Some of them have never practiced of that 10. Some of them have vibrant practices that they're still kind of keeping as they work. So when Devin is talking about trying to connect our members to legislators, the purpose of that, and it's purposeful because there's about 1,500 to 1,600 bills, legislative initiatives, I'm looking at Lynne, I think, around that get introduced in a year. Now, all those impact law, right? All those impact statutes. There's a purpose that they're being drafted with, and of those, about 200 to 300, depending upon the session, become acts. So those are laws that are enacted. So our members, and again, this is kind of going back to that composition of the legislature. So we have 10 that are attorneys. So one of the purposeful reasons behind the advocacy aspect of it and connecting our members to the legislature is purely going back to that teaching aspect or that educational aspect. It gives us an opportunity to quickly educate legislators on potential impacts of things that they're looking at doing or passing. And that's why it's impactful that our sections are engaged in the legislative process. Again, there's 13 practice sections, but they can offer expertise into, all right, you're impacting the probate system. Here's what the reality of your policy position does, both pro and con. And so I think that's where the advocacy aspect comes in really important is because that and the composition is what it is and your background is what it is. We all want, just like citizens, we all want a diverse legislature that you want a farmer in there, right? At some point, if you're in a rural area, you want a doctor in there, or you want somebody that understands your issues. But as it kind of goes through time, we just have less and less attorneys in the legislature, which is why it's more and more important that state bar members take that active engagement opportunity to develop relationships, whether it be through an email or whether it be through a tweet or whether it be through a meeting. I mean, again, it's their opportunity to kind of assist in that process.
Yeah. I mean, tell me about the importance of that, because sometimes, if I'll have a thought, it's like, I want to contact my representative, but who am I? They're not really listening to me. But are they listening? I mean, do they really listen to the constituents and what they're saying?
Yes.
Yes,
they do. It absolutely matters. It absolutely matters, and it makes an impact. And everyone has sort of that voice of doubt. Oh, yeah, I'm just one person, or I've reached out and I didn't necessarily get a great response back. But every single point of contact makes a difference, and every single time you reach out makes a difference. And being consistent and reaching out, especially as an attorney, reaching out on issues that impact the practice, or reaching out on issues on, say, criminal justice reform or funding for the courts, those points of contact make an even bigger impact. Because as Cale mentioned, there's fewer attorneys in the legislature, so a lot of legislators are thirsty for input from the legal community because there's less institutional knowledge now in the legislature. And so they really want to hear from lawmakers or from attorneys. The other thing is that by continuing to reach out and continuing to make an impact and talk to your lawmakers, you can start to build a longer-term relationship with those legislators. And that can really pay dividends not only for issues that the state bar cares about, but for the person making the contact. One thing that we've seen is the more contacts we have from our members to specific lawmakers, the more they're coming back to Cale and Lynne and asking questions about areas of the law that they may be unfamiliar with, or they may have other constituents that have legal questions that they need to route back to us. And so we're seeing the impact come back around full circle by engaging our members with their legislators.
Yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
State Bar of Wisconsin members can get critical illness insurance by answering just 3 health questions. Help tackle the financial burden of unexpected life-changing illnesses with coverage issued by the Prudential Insurance Company of America. To learn more, visit wisbar.memberenroll.com.
Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
Well, and you mentioned educating them, because I know that some of the working groups, the section working groups, like Lynne, you had some recent legislation in the family law area. I know there was the recent limited liability company law was updated. So how instrumental are those sort of committee level work in educating legislators about what those legal changes should be?
Well, I can speak a little bit just on the business law aspect of it, because we're talking about over 500 page bill. So, right away, instantly, what you get from when you approach legislators on that is like, that is, they're normally looking at 2-3 page bills, changing a sentence here or there, a word here or there. But when you're essentially rewriting a whole chapter, that's where the membership aspect of it and the connective outreach that members have with legislators. And we did something unique with that bill. We actually held a informational session that we invited all 132 legislative staff and legislators to, and we essentially kind of debriefed them on the bill and said, hey, if you have questions, this is the time to ask them before the bill's even introduced. But that membership aspect of it and the engagement from attorneys is, we can kind of give them the roadmap of what we know about legislators and how we've dealt with them in the past and know their staff. We know that, but Lynn and I don't understand the impact that the issue will have on a practice or an attorney, because they're the ones that deal with that in their clients or their practice every day in and out. So we provide them the guidance on the politics, right, on the legislative issues, and then they provide us the guidance on here's the impact on the practice, or here's the impact that it's going to have on clients, or the hypothetical that will occur, based on this case law or that issue or this word or that word. And that's the one thing I've learned from our attorneys often is words matter, right? As it's written in the books, those words matter to a judge. It matters to our members, and it matters to that client's case. And so it's helpful to have those participatory members through that process. The one thing, just going a little bit back on Devin, is on that contact issue. Yeah, I mean, contacts with legislators do matter. I think we get hung up on the more partisan issues because those are the ones that you see on news. That's what you see in the newspapers. That's kind of what you see. But again, going back to that concept of how many bills get introduced and how many actually get signed, of those, a majority of them are bipartisan voted on bills. Those are bills that are going through the committee process, getting vetted, having a debate, looking at it. And so, when you're talking 10% or so of the bills the legislature deals with really reaches that partisan threshold to where you really see the differences between Republicans and Democrats. A lot of the bills that we deal with are in that bipartisan nature. We obviously do deal in partisan issues. Anybody in the legislature does, but I think, and Lynn talked about that, when we take efforts, the one thing that we have to do is we have to work with both sides right from the get-go, no matter the issue. And that's not only just both sides of the legislature and Democratic parties and Republican Party, but also within the other trade associations. There's I think we're into the hundreds of registered lobbyists in the state. I think we almost be in the thousands, aren't we?
It's
1,600 or something. So just imagine all those different interests that we have out there.
Yeah, and sometimes it amazes me how you guys operate because some of these issues, they go on for years. I know and Lynn, maybe you can talk a little bit about how your everyday interaction with lawmakers, how that works. But just like the expungement issue, I think when I started here at the bar in 2010, we were working on that, and we're still working on that now. So what is it about some of these bills that just takes so long to sort of get through? And again, Lynn, can kind of just give a picture of like what your typical day looks like, or when you start working on bills, like how does that how do you start working on that on a day-to-day basis?
It really does.
First, you start with coffee. No, you don't drink coffee. Right. First, just kidding. What's your day look like?
You don't drink coffee, Lynn?
I want to know what your typical day.
I don't do caffeine. Yeah, never gotten that habit, and I think it blows everyone away whenever they figure that out.
Away, first thing.
That is true. We try to stay on top of the news. I'm not a big personal social media person, but I do get on social media for work. And I am pretty active on watching what's going on Twitter, because you can find out a lot about what's going on if you watch the legislators' Twitter accounts. You can see they're very upfront and direct about a lot that's going on and responsive to things on social media, staying on top of the news, usually just trying to catch up on everything that you can at the beginning of the day so you know what's going on. You know the layers of issues on when you go talk to people. So a lot of times, especially midweek when the session is in or when legislators are most active at the Capitol, we will spend a lot of time trying to, especially at the beginning of session, reintroduce ourselves to members who are returning, especially if they're new to a committee that matters to us, like a Judiciary Committee or a Children and Families Committee or something like that. And then we'll meet with them, try and, like I said, reintroduce the bar to them. And then we meet with a lot of new legislators too, whether they're on the committees that matter to us or not, because we want them to understand the bar, understand that we're a resource for them and their constituents, and then also just come to us with anything that they may need or ideas that they may have that maybe comes to them personally or through a constituent or something like that. So we really focus a lot in the beginning of session on reminding people we're here and introducing ourselves to the new people. And then I think it's just a lot of maintenance beyond that, a lot of spending time at the Capitol, popping in offices, checking in with people. Just there's a lot that you can find out just by being present and wandering the halls. It sounds silly, but you can really find out some very valuable information just by running into someone in the elevator or in a hallway. And it just, being present really makes a difference. And it's hard to quantify that, or it's just an invaluable thing, being around the building. And that's why Cale and I spend most of our time downtown.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
A way it was defined to me years ago was the legislature is like high stakes high school.
I call it high school with money.
Right. Either way that you want to look at it, but Lynne is exactly, right on. It really is about a presence and people seeing you there, associating you with the state bar, and that's the visuality aspect of the job. Being in committees, just really the visual aspect of it. And then you learn things too, right? You start to engage with people and, you realize maybe their kids do something that your kids did or do, or, there's some connectivity that you can find. You're always finding a connection, right? You're always, your goal is to find the connection, find that memorable aspect of you or them, and then using that. It sounds horrific right now as I'm describing it, but it really is. It's trying to manage expectations, managing frustrations, because not everything goes your way. And then sometimes when things kind of go your way, you also have to kind of have that, be humble, right? Not spike the football before you get into the end zone a little bit, because there's issues, there's people on both sides. You're continually dealing with people. You're continually trying to work through things. I think we always try, the first thing we try and do is, all right, so where's our negotiation here? Like especially if we're opposed, right, to something, all right, where can we find a common ground? Where can we find something in the middle? And that's the hard part, because sometimes our members look at it and say, there is no middle ground here. This is just a bad bill, and then it's like, okay, so then you got to go back to them and it's like, all right, so here's where we're at. Here's where we stand. Here's the politics. Here's the votes. We do a lot of vote counting. So it's interesting.
And now, a word from our sponsors. In these uncertain economic times, the State Bar of Wisconsin wants to make sure that you and your practice have the best available tools. Ultimate Pass and Books Unbound are available for purchase using 6-month installment plans. Contact our customer service team at 1-800-728-7788 for more information. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
I want to turn to one of the top priorities of the State Bar right now, especially because a lot of our listeners are younger attorneys who are just starting out. Many of them go through the public defender offices or start out as assistant district attorneys. And one of the big issues right now is funding in the criminal justice system. And I know it's something we've been talking about for months now. Can you sort of give us a picture of what's going on with that. What are we working on? What is the request, and why? Why are we asking for that?
Yeah, and I think going even back to the question a little bit. So we've been a little bit more visual over the last few months, but this has actually been something that we've been dealing with for really multiple sessions. I think really almost since I started lobbying, we've talked about the funding aspect, especially the human staffing aspect of our court system and our justice system. And so I think the difference is we've been a little bit more public in some of that, I think, in the last couple of months, which I think has been very healthy for the bar to do, because I think we've gotten to the point to where we see there's really an issue in terms of where the market is for our public justice system workers. And the market's kind of changed. Now, economically, it's changed, right? We've got issues of caseloads coming kind of out of the pandemic aspects of it. And so, but it's something that started about a decade ago when pay progression for the district attorney offices and public defender offices kind of started, to where it was, what they were seeing is you saw a lot of 0 to 3 year attorneys, and then year 3 to year 15 attorneys, there was hardly any, and then you had a bunch of 15-year plus attorneys, to where they were getting close to retirement. And I think we're starting to see this more and more with the practice, right? And so what really kind of kicked this off a little bit going into this session was some of the issues that we saw with staffing in the Dodge County district attorney office, and where they essentially for a few weeks didn't have a district attorney, and they didn't have staffing, and
because they couldn't find
Right.
anyone to fill those vacancies.
Right, couldn't find anyone to fill the vacancies. They had a retirement coming up, and so I think it put a microscope on an issue that, frankly, we were able to look at it more in the broader scope of all the counties in the state. And then all of a sudden you kind of zoom out from Dodge County, and you're like, oh, wait a second. There's a problem in Sheboygan. There's a problem that we're seeing in Wausau. There's, the public defender's office was starting to see problems in Ashland and Bayfield, to where they had some vacancies and had to pull staff one way or the other. So then all of a sudden it became, as you kind of widen the scope out, you started to see it where you hadn't seen issues previously. I mean, normally urban areas didn't have a ton of staffing concerns. And then you're looking at it and you're like, Dodge County's not that far from an urban area, and Waukesha County's not that, they are an urban area. And so I think I wouldn't say it fell into the lap, but it was just one of those things to where there was a couple of things that was starting to occur, to where we were like, we can bring these issues to the forefront. And then you look at it, and there's 10% turnover in the public defender's office in a year. I think almost 10% of the DA, ADA positions right now are vacant, and you're like, this is not good.
And is a large part of that because of the pay?
Yeah, and that's exactly that. The pay is an issue. I mean, right now, an incoming first-year ADA is around just a little over $27 an hour.
That's getting more at the Walmart distribution center in Beaver Dam right now.
Yeah,
that's not. It's funny when you say it out loud, because you think, well, that's not bad. But then when you sit there and you compare it to where the market is in other places, and you realize that we haven't kept pace with the market. And so when you have a young attorney, which would be a good person that's looking at kind of setting out, or they wanted to go do that, they have a choice. And the choice is, there's another place that will pay me more money, and I have student loans because it's expensive to go out and to go to law school. Well, first get your undergrad and then go to law school. So you're talking 7+ years of schooling at least. And so they're looking at it, and I think if I was an attorney, it's an economic choice. I can go and work a lot of hours in a ADA office, probably have a ton of compassion fatigue, have a ton of workload put on me, a ton of work stressors. And when you're starting to compare and put that pro and con list together, it's a good job to be an ADA or a public defender. You are doing good work, but it comes at the cost of, I want to do that good work, but at what point is my breaking point with where my salary is, where I get to choose to live, where I get to go and expend my time? And those are big considerations. And I think it's just one of those things to where legislators get the issue. They understand that, yeah, this is something that we have to fix. We can't sit there and talk about public safety and public safety concerns. Look, you can put more law enforcement on the streets, right? I think we all as citizens want safe communities, right? We want to feel safe in our homes. We want to feel safe going shopping. So you can add law enforcement. So they go out and they produce citations. Well, guess who then puts that on their back, right? It's those ADAs that then have to look at those cases. Then you have a victim. Then you got to worry about, we need victim services for this individual. Then we got to give the person that's been accused of that crime their ability to defend
fair representation.
Fair representation. So it's one of these things, and it allows us to kind of talk about the system. It allows us to talk about the stool between ADAs, judges, and public defenders. It allows us to talk about, some of those policy choices that lawmakers might make that are, again, a lot of people support safe communities, but there's that aspect of there's more to just safe communities than the law enforcement aspect of it, because what's the next step? Then you go into the criminal justice system and the court process, and then on top of that you get into the correctional aspect, and those places have struggled financially, right? Because we've seen schools need funding. We pay a lot of money from the state from a school perspective. But the one thing that I keep kind of going back to and we can offer to lawmakers is if you look at the criminal justice system in totality and you look at the percentage, I mean, we're probably talking about a $90 billion budget. Mm-hmm. And you look at it, it's if you're talking about an investment into the staff for salaries, it's really a small portion of the larger state budget. And there's some opportunities, we think, with the surplus for the investment now, so we don't kind of continue with this 10 years of pay progression conversation, which we've supported pay progression. We've supported the rate going to $70 in the public. We haven't even got to the private bar rate that was at $40 since 1995, got raised a few years to $70, that just hadn't fixed it. Mm-hmm. And so it just gives us an opportunity to bring those issues. And so the triad, so to speak, right, is, Lynne and I are able to discuss those issues with lawmakers in conjunction with other lobbyists and staff from the public defender's office and others. And then we get Devin on the other side of it that's able to work with our members to get contacts out to continue to highlight and push the issue. Because when we talk about getting that momentum going forward, the momentum is there, but you can't stop. Mm-hmm. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the decision phase of the budget. We've gotten to the point of the governor's introduced it, here's my plan, and now we're on to the legislative phase of it, which is where the momentum from Devin and our members needs to come in, because we need to continue to push and have those contacts with the 132 and the Republican majorities to say this is a priority. This is a priority of your constituents. And we've done that really well, kind of January, February, March, and now we're kind of really back into it now in April and May, to where we kind of got to make another push. We need more contacts.
Yeah, and the request, the budget request, is coming from a coalition, right? Yep. And it includes the public defenders and the district attorney organizations, which are state jobs. But they're in alignment on this, and we're supporting that effort. Yep. Okay. Devin, what has been have we gotten a lot of engagement on this issue? Have you heard from members who are talking about it and sending those messages? Where are we?
Absolutely, yeah. We've gotten this issue has been the most popular issue that we have engaged our membership on since I've been with the bar. Is there still room to grow? Sure. But we've had, just since the beginning of the year, several hundred members reach out and use our system. Now, are there members out there who are contacting the legislators and having meetings with them and talking about this issue? Yeah, absolutely, and it happens daily.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks back, there were some judges, I think, in Chippewa Falls that reached out and had a meeting with some of their legislators. But unless they are using our advocacy network or calling us up and letting us know, we don't know all of the contacts that happen. And we're not always going to know what's said, but it helps when people use our system so that we can see how many and where members are communicating with legislators. That helps us to coordinate and amplify the voice of the profession in a way that's just not possible when, in the past we might put out a word and say, hey, everybody contact your lawmakers, but we get no feedback on that. So my job is kind of twofold. One, it's to increase engagement, but also to coordinate that engagement and make sure that people understand the benefits of using some of the tools that we've provided so that we can enhance the work that we're doing. It's just a huge difference when we know anything that the State Bar does. We're going to have members in Dane County and Milwaukee County and Brown County and Waukesha County that are going to reach out. That's just where our members are. But those members only reach a very limited number of legislators. By being able to see members in the greater state and what we might call outstate, being able to see that those folks are reaching out, or places where they're not. There are areas up in the north or in the southwest of the state that have very few attorneys and very few attorneys that engage with the tools and engage through the advocacy center that we've provided. So in those areas, there's a need for us to continue to do more outreach with members there and say, hey, work with us and let us help you. And by doing that, we can enhance your voice with other members who are throughout the rest of the state.
Yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsors. What? You don't have an Ultimate Pass yet? Oh, that's a mistake. Find out why at wisbar.org/ultimatepass. Thank you. And now back to the Bottom Up podcast.
Do we know how many public defenders how many of our members are public defenders? How many of our members are prosecutors?
Yeah, it's the percentage of the workload, but I'd have to look at terms of what the percentage of the total membership is, but it's.
Approximately how many prosecutors do we have in the state?
It's around 400, just over 450, I believe.
Okay,
in terms of prosecutors.
And what about public defenders?
I think it's just a little over that, 5 something.
For public defenders?
Yeah, I'd have to go look to see. I'd have to go look and check to see how that all works out. And you got to remember on the other aspect of it is those cases where the public defenders have conflicts, that then goes to the private bar and assigns those conflicts at that $70 an hour rate, which the difficulty of finding, specifically in rural areas, finding attorneys willing to right. operate those cases at $70, it doesn't cover the
well, and again, because someone hears, $70 an hour, that's a lot. But when you think about it, all that goes into a case and the hourly expenses that it takes for an attorney to take those cases, they're just saying no, right?
$70 an hour is not a wage. It's
right.
It's a business fee.
Yeah.
Yeah, they still have their law office costs.
The law office costs, research,
they have
dues, all that, everything that goes into an hourly rate. It's just not straight profit. It's by when you look at that rate, it's probably their profit margin is probably what, $10 after all is said and done, or even break even. I've heard some say.
Yeah, we've done studies that show that most attorneys don't break even.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we've had attorneys that have had outreach with us that have said we've taken a lot of those cases pro bono. It's just, especially when it was $40. They made the choice that was for the common good.
Yeah. So Devin, what needs to be done from now? Okay, so the budget, they typically will vote on it, in June or?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
probably Lynn could give a little bit better of a timeline, but
What's the timeline, Lynn?
Right now, it's the information gathering, and they're doing all the joint finance hearings throughout the state. Next month, Joint Finance Committee will start working on hearings and taking agencies at each day at a time at each hearing. And then they'll finalize that mid-June, mid-ish June, and then the legislature will vote on it, usually in late June. And then once they send it to the governor, he's got 6 days to act on it.
Okay, so we're talking now, really kind of we're pushing now from now until, and Devin, what would you encourage members to do in order to keep this in the forefront for the legislature? And
so step one, subscribe to a Rotunda Report and stay up to date with everything that we're doing and following along with the budget process and what Cale or Lynn are up to at the Capitol. In there, you'll also see a breakdown of all of the upcoming public hearings on the budget that the Joint Finance Committee is conducting around the state. If you've got the time and it's in an area that's convenient for you, attend one of those hearings and speak up. If you can't make it in person, there's a place you can go online, and that's in our latest Rotunda Report article that went out today, where you can submit comments online to the Joint Finance Committee about that. Step two, go to the Action Center. Again, wisbar.org/gov-relations, G-O-V relations. When you land on that page, you'll see the Action Center just under a blue sky banner, and you can send a message there. Send a message about the funding issue for prosecutors and defenders. You can send a message on expungement reform. You can send a message on any topic you like. I talked to somebody that sent a message saying, hey, please congratulate my son because he just graduated from the Eagle Scouts. That's fine too. It's a tool for you to use, but it's a really easy one. And the more you use it, hopefully the more comfortable it becomes and becomes second nature as one of the easiest ways to reach out. And number three, if you're somebody who's a political junkie like us and really enjoys this stuff and really wants to figure out how you can become a leader in your profession and really advance things that are important, reach out to us. We're always looking for folks who want to go above and beyond and start to become someone who can engage your fellow colleagues in this advocacy work that we're doing. We're looking for, occasionally we'll need people to testify on legislation, and sometimes when that's appropriate, we'll reach out to members to do so. We're always looking for people to reach out as peers and talk about how important it is to reach other attorneys. Not every attorney does criminal justice work, but criminal justice work affects most attorneys in some fashion. And the fact that, we need courts that are funded and functioning for the rest of the legal process to work. And so I think everybody's impacted by this issue. Most attorneys care about justice broadly, and so care about things like expungement. They care about things like criminal justice reform. A lot of what the State Bar is doing is probably something that you'll take some interest in. So reach out and ask us questions when you have them, and find out more about how you can get more involved. We're always happy.
we also have a website, www.justicebreakingpoint.com, which includes not only all the Action Center aspects, but articles that have been written. I mean, we've gotten
about almost 36 now news articles on the justice funding issue.
From radio to small papers to large papers, all those have really helped a lot.
You can read the memos that we sent to all legislators and the governor on this topic. You can read press releases that we've sent out about the issue from our presidents. It's kind of a clearinghouse for that topic.
That's great. Well, Cale, Devin, Lynn, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about all the work you're doing. It's really important for the State Bar, for our members, and for Wisconsin in general, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, let us know. I'm your host, Emilio Villagale, and we'll catch you next time.